Okay, well, welcome everybody to tonight's presentation. This is Get Amped, the basics of electrifying your home. And I am Sean Rodine. Today we're going to talk about the what, the why, and the how of home electrification. And this presentation is sponsored by the City of Plymouth and Hennepin County. So our agenda for tonight will be first starting with what is electrification? How do we define it? Or what's our definition anyway? Weatherization and why that's important, if it's necessary in your home, heating, the important component of home heating, appliances, how to get electrification ready if you need some new wiring or a service panel upgrade, and some resources to help you do all these things. At the end, we'll do Q&A, and I will say that with the caveat, if you have clarifying questions, like there's an acronym or I say something you don't quite understand, that's fine. Go ahead and raise your hand. But if it's specifically about your own home setup, then wait until the end, and we should have plenty of time to answer those questions. So the other thing is, if there's a lot of links and numbers on these slides, so don't worry about jotting them down quickly. I'll send you the slides. If we can get your email, we'll get you the slides, and you can look through those at your leisure. All right, so let's get started. What is electrification? So our definition of electrification is replacing fossil gas or natural gas. These are kind of used interchangeably. Equipment and appliances with electrically powered options. And to talk a bit about our program, I'm with Electrify Everything Minnesota, and our program aims to support the gradual electrification of single-family homes to promote resident health and climate sustainability through things like education, what I'm doing right now, presentations, workshops, one-on-one support, connecting you with that support, and financial resources and contractors that can help you get the jobs done. And I want to emphasize the word gradual here because, we're big believers in electrification, but we know that most people aren't starting with mostly electric homes, especially in Minnesota. So we emphasize gradual and know that it's a process. So why electrify? What are the reasons you should or one might want to electrify? One reason is that there are growing options to use clean electricity. So our electric grid in Minnesota is getting cleaner and cleaner. There's more coal-fired power plants that are being retired. And now per unit electricity is cleaner than natural gas, the alternative. And in fact, I believe it was 2024, the state legislature passed a law requiring that by 2040, 100% of the electricity generated in Minnesota will be carbon-free. So the inertia is all moving in that direction. Another reason is that using electricity in many cases is safer. So electric appliances don't have some of the same hazards that gas equipment might have, such as indoor air contaminants and combustion hazards, or things like backdrafting through old water heaters, or even gas leaks. Another reason is that electricity rates are more stable. So the price that the utilities are allowed to charge in Minnesota is regulated by the Public Utilities Commission. And so you'll see over time the increase in price is not quite linear, but it's more gradual. Whereas with natural gas, that's determined by things like exploration discoveries or world events. And this winter, we'll see really, really high demand because of these frosty temperatures. So there's a lot more fluctuation and variability with gas. Another reason some people might electrify is that electrifying our homes makes a difference for the health of people and the planet. So a lot of people come to us and they're motivated by the environment and wanting to reduce their own impact, but it's pretty overwhelming. Well, one thing you can do is start with your own home, and by replacing gas appliances with electric ones, you can chip away at some of that impact, if that's your motivation. Okay, these are all good reasons, but the challenge is that electrification can, in some cases, be confusing. So homeowners want to electrify, but a lot of questions come up, such as which projects do I pursue? What are the equipment options? How do they compare to each other? Pros and cons. What resources and incentives are available out there? And do you know about them? And can you take advantage of all of them? And who do you talk to for like neutral guidance or third-party guidance? And are there things that you can or should do yourself? So today we're going to talk about these key projects for electrifying single-family homes. We'll start with weatherization, talk about heating, water heating, clothes drying, and cooking. Throughout this presentation, there are some trivia questions to keep you on your toes. Some of them will be, were you paying attention? And some will just be kind of like random facts. So, which are seasons in Minnesota? Well, these all seem like seasons, and we're certainly not in one of a few of these seasons. But of course, the answer is construction. There's construction and there's winter. And right now, we're definitely in winter. Although I see construction going on too, but a lot more winter. But construction season's on its way, never fear. So, weatherization. One reason we talk about weatherization is that compared to the national average, Minnesota homes use a lot more energy for space heating. This average is for an older Minnesota home, but it still stands that it's way more than, as a percentage, than the national average, which is about 40% in Minnesota, 72%. So two questions come up when we're talking about saving energy regarding weatherization, heating, and sustainability. How much heat do our homes need, and how are we providing that heat? We're starting with weatherization, but what does weatherization involve? Well, it involves keeping parts of the home that keep heated or cool air from escaping. So we're talking insulation, air sealing, windows. If you look at this diagram here, you'll see that red part of the home is what we usually call the building envelope, right? So the walls, the attic, the basement, even out there toward the porch, that's areas you want to keep sealed and insulated so that whether you're heating or cooling your home, that conditioned air is not escaping. And what does this have to do with electrification? Well, if you weatherize your home, if it needs weatherization, it makes all the electrification that much more easier and effective. All right, which parts of a home typically lack insulation? Starting with maybe a simple one. A, refrigerator. B, walls. C, windows. D, attic. Attic's one? There's two. Attic and walls, yeah. In fact, I know we're in Plymouth. It's much newer city than Minneapolis, but in Minneapolis, I think it's like close to 70% of the attics in Minneapolis lack sufficient insulation, what we would say is sufficient. Walls, it's about a quarter, but it's a lot. So a lot of homes don't have these here, much newer housing, more built to the more recent code. But speaking of the code, one of the reasons to insulate and air seal is that homes built before 1980. What year are your homes?
64.
64? 93. Okay. So yeah, if you haven't had an energy audit, you might get one and find out, but homes built before 1980 often lack attic and wall insulation because there was no building code requiring levels of insulation. My parents bought a split level 78, I think, and it was insulated, but it really varies. I mean, there's old homes that have insulation, there's old homes that don't. So the point is, a lot of homes don't have it, and the benefits of insulation and air sealing are pretty substantial. For example, it saves about 18% heating and cooling costs in the average Minnesota home. It's cost effective. The payback period of insulation is around like 5 to 7 years. So that's a pretty pretty quick payback. It improves comfort, so you don't have too many unevenly heated or cooled areas in your home, prevents ice dams, and sets a home up for electrification. So we saw this picture of this person insulating an attic. Let's talk about air sealing. So insulation, people usually think of that and say, okay, I know I need to insulate, but they don't always think about air sealing. But air sealing is also important. It prevents conditioned air from escaping through gaps and seams in your home. So common air leaks include things you can see on the right in the graphic there: attic hatches, lighting, vents and chimneys, rim joists in your basement, and recessed lighting, fans, and bypasses. You can see down there in the basement, the dryer vent. We have air that comes in through dryer vents. And I will say, I did an audit, went out with one of our audit teams here. I think it was in Shoreview, and the home was built in like, I think the 90s. And it was very well insulated, but it was not air sealed. And we could tell by the audit pictures that where the air sealing needed to be done, like mostly in the attic. So, um, so yeah, it's overlooked, but also very important. Here's an example. These are two images. They're the same image, but taken with different types of, well, they're both taken with FLIRs, but one is infrared, one is not. So this is the second story of a home, and they're doing an energy audit. They're pulling air from outside into the home to see where it's coming in. And you can see that that attic hatch has a lot of leakage around it. It's all that purple, dark, purple, blue, even black is cold air coming in. Even the paneling on the top of the ceiling has air coming in and between where the wall meets the ceiling and then around the inside of the window. So if you get an energy audit, you can also get these images with a report about your home and figure out where air leaks might be located in your home. But this shows the importance of air sealing as well. Okay, this one's I like this one. So all the air leaks in an older home can add up to having a blank-sized hole or blank-sized hole open at all times. Is it a 1 by 1 inch, 6 by 6 inch, 12 by 12 inch, or 24 by 24 inch? What do you think? D. Both D? Yeah, you're both correct. These older homes, they're quite leaky, or they can be. I've seen older homes that perform very well on energy audits, but in the typical older home that has never been air sealed, that adds up to roughly, yeah, 4 square foot hole. And then you can imagine all winter, all that warm air escaping through that, 24/7. So that's a lot. That's a lot of energy and money just out the window or out the walls or wherever they are, through the roof. So to emphasize this, weatherization is pretty critical before addressing heating because it makes electrifying your home much more affordable and effective. And in fact, weatherization reduces heating load on an average of 18%. So if you get an air source heat pump, it won't have to run as much, or you may even be able to get a smaller unit because it doesn't need to produce the same amount of energy to just keep your home at a stable temperature. All right, so what do these things cost? Well, here are some insulation air sealing incentives, depending on what your utilities are. So CenterPoint, that's your heating company or your heating source. They offer up to $3,000 in rebates for walls and attic. I should mention at the top the typical upfront cost, depending on the size of your home, what you need. For walls and attic would be between $7,000 and $13,000. But again, there's rebates. Excel Energy has rebates, but that depends. You can get the cooling rebate if you're an electric customer, and that's not 3,000, but it's something. And then there's federal rebates that are expected in 2026. We don't know when yet, but we're waiting on them. State of Minnesota has loans up to $60,000, and then for the city of Plymouth, they have between either $500 to $750, depending on your income qualifications and if you live in a climate vulnerable area. So you can go on the city's website to the home energy rebate program and find out if you live in one of those areas or not, or what the income qualifications are. You can also go to our website, electrifyeverythingmn.org, and we have this nifty calculator where you can put in your household information, your zip code, and it will tell you the incentives that are available in your area. So that includes City of Plymouth, but also, and then who's your utility? Is it Hennepin? Is it Excel? And then it will tell you what's available for you. All in one place. Okay, now let's talk about heating. So we talked about how much heat our homes need, or how we reduce the amount that it might need. And then our second question was, how are we providing that heat? And again, heating is a huge component of energy use in Minnesota. So that's why we start with weatherization and heating. So who here has heard about heat pumps? A couple of you? Okay. So a heat pump, it says it's a heat pump, and that is true, but it's a little bit misleading. So heat pumps move or pump heat through refrigerant lines, much like a two-way air conditioner. And so on the left, we have the summer, the cooling season, and we want heat out of our homes. So the heat pump will pump heat out of your home to the outside and cool the air on the inside. And then when winter rolls around, fall or the heating season, it will do the opposite. It will pull heat from the air through those refrigerant lines and pump it into your home. So that's why it's either pumping one direction or another. And we're talking about air source heat pumps here. I know there are ground source heat pumps, air to water systems, but we're focusing on just air source heat pumps. And one of the reasons we are focusing on them is because they're flexible. So if you, depending on your setup in your home, you can get a ducted or ductless system. So do you have central air? Central air? Okay, so then you would want to go with a ducted system, which integrates really well into your central air system. They're very common with furnaces, and they typically replace your central AC. So the outdoor unit actually doesn't look that much different from a central air system, except you'll notice that it sits up on a stand, and that's because it runs during the winter. It needs to sit above what's the snow line generally. That doesn't mean it can't have snow at the base of it or anything, but it can't sit on like a concrete slab like a central AC system. So you'll see them on stands. But there are those refrigerant lines that are connected from the indoor unit from the outdoor to the indoor unit. The indoor unit sits above the furnace, the same as the central AC system. And so, most people wouldn't really know the difference between the two. But if, let's say, you don't have central air, some older homes don't have central air, or they have boilers, well, you can still install an air source heat pump, but you would want to go with a ductless or a mini split system. So these are common with boilers or electric baseboard heat in homes without central AC. The outdoor unit looks a little bit different. Looks like kind of like a giant suitcase. And again, it sits up on a stand because we don't want it sitting in the snow. But it has those refrigerant lines where it's moving heat in and out of your home. And in the indoor units, you install these things called heads or cassettes. You've probably seen those in some places. And they can heat or cool one room or an area or multiple rooms, depending on the size. But yeah, these are good for both types of systems or setups. Okay, another trivia question. How much more efficient can a heat pump be than electric resistance heating? So we're talking like baseboard heating or space heaters. Is it A, the same, B, 1.5 times, C, 3 times, or D, twice as efficient? What said C? Yeah, C. Under optimum conditions, it's 300% more efficient, but it does go between 2 and 3. Yeah, it can be up to 3 times more efficient because it's moving heat rather than heating an element, which is then heating you. It's moving heat from the outside. Even when it's really cold, it still can pull heat out of the air because there's still heat to be used. However, they aren't equally efficient. Like I said, their efficiency varies. They aren't equally efficient in all conditions. So this graph, on the vertical axis, we have the heating provided by the air source heat pump. And on the x-axis, or the horizontal axis, we have the outdoor temperature. And you can see at 65 degrees outside, this heat pump is providing about 40,000 BTUs per hour. But as the temperature drops, the efficiency of the heat pump also drops because, as I said, it's pulling heat from outside of your home and heating inside your home. Well, if there's less heat, it has to work harder and harder to pull that heat out to make your home a cozy 68 degrees, right? So as we go down in temperature, all the way down to negative 15 degrees, that brings us down to about somewhere between 15,000 and 20,000 BTUs. So we'll talk about the types of systems that can accompany air source heat pumps, but these this is the relationship between the temperature and the efficiency at which they operate. The good news is that much of the time we need heat in Minnesota, even in Minnesota, is for mild to moderately cold weather. So even though we've had a pretty brutal winter and it seems to kind of vary every other year, 80% of the time of the heating during the heating season is above 20 degrees because the heating season stretches from October to May. So if you think about January, February, those are kind of definitely colder months, but the ones on the periphery kind of balance it out. So 80% of the time we're above 20 degrees and 20% we're below 20 degrees. And a heat pump is pretty efficient above 20 degrees. So it can work for most of your heating season. A heat pump can partially or fully electrify your heating needs. And we're going to talk about hybrid systems and all electric systems. So a hybrid system is a heat pump paired with a fossil fuel system, either a furnace or a boiler. And some of the benefits of this system setup are that it can keep your energy bill neutral or possibly even lower. And it significantly reduces your household carbon emissions if that's what you're going for. Some of the drawbacks are, one of the drawbacks is that the setup can be a bit complicated depending on your existing equipment. You may need a new furnace for it to be compatible with your air source heat pump, or you may need two sets of controls for your boiler and your heat pump. How does the heating and cooling system work throughout the year? Well, in the summer, your heat pump would keep your house cool, and then come fall, it would start to heat your home. In the winter, it would, at some point, maybe when it gets negative 20 degrees, pass the baton off to your furnace or your boiler, and your furnace would heat, and then spring would come around and your heat pump would be able to do the heating again. For all electric systems, they are heat pumps paired with an electric plenum, which is just a resistance heat element inside your furnace. And the benefits are that this can be simpler to set up because it's all electric and it's an integrated electric system. And this also maximally reduces your household carbon emissions because it's all electricity, and electricity is lower carbon at this point in Minnesota than natural gas. The drawbacks are that your winter heating bills will be more expensive. That can be substantial. And we'll talk about actually how it may kind of balance out too. But a cold climate heat pump is also necessary. That's a high efficiency heat pump, and those tend to be more expensive, but they also run more efficiently. So over the course of its lifetime, it may save you money versus a lower efficiency model. But up front, they are more expensive. And they work very similarly, heating and cooling throughout the year. So summer, heat pump cools. Fall, the heat pump heats. Winter, the heat pump and the secondary system work in tandem to keep you warm. And then the heat pump springs back in action come spring. Okay, so what are the benefits of a hybrid system? That is an air source heat pump with a either furnace, gas furnace, or boiler backup, or a secondary system. Is it A, neutral or lower energy bills, B, simpler setup, C, significant decarbonization, or D, maximum decarbonization. And there are two. Yep. A and C, neutral or lower energy bills, and significant decarbonization. So what are the benefits of an all-electric system? Well, you can probably guess. The other two, yes. Simpler setup and maximum decarbonization. Yep. And these can be pretty expensive, depending on the size of the unit and the size of your home, $12,000 to $24,000. But there are rebates available. Um, Excel and CenterPoint, if you have those two utilities, they have a combined rebate of $2,000. Right, Hennepin offers up to $675. Those federal and state of Minnesota. State of Minnesota has this rebate match program coming sometime this year. So look out for that, and the federal is also substantial too. But if you'll see, I didn't mention these on the other slide. So income limits, if you didn't know, AMI is area median income. And I believe the city has a chart, correct, on their website. So you can look there, or you can look on the state website. They also have AMI charts. So if you're 150% AMI or 80%, that will determine what you're eligible for. And then again, City of Plymouth offers between $500 and $750 rebate. So you can stack these and come away with taking a chunk of money off that cost. And here's an added bonus actually for if you have Excel. Who are your utilities? Excel? Excel? Okay. Most people are Excel here. So Excel has a new electric space heating rate. So this just came out this October, and this is for electric customers of Excel. Your primary heating source must be electric. So if you have baseboards, or if you have, an air source heat pump and it's doing most of the heating, it's considered primary. So you get nearly half the standard rate from October 1st to May 31st. I think the standard rate is about 11.5 cents a kilowatt hour, and this is about, I think it's 6 or 6.5. So it's quite a bit of a reduction. And that's for all of your electricity too. So it's not just whatever is using electricity in your house, you'd be paying that same rate for those months from October 1st to May 31st. So how you can sign up for this is you call Excel and you let them know that you would like to switch to the electric space heating rate, and they will get you connected. But we're not just talking about heating and weatherization. You can electrify other appliances in your home, such as your water heater, cooking appliances, and your clothes dryer. So water heaters. We mentioned water heaters earlier. So when we're talking about energy efficient electric water heaters, we're talking about heat pump water heaters. That's because heat pump water heaters are very energy efficient. In fact, they're over 3 times more energy efficient than standard electric tanks. And they're also safer than gas, because with gas water heaters, sometimes you deal with incomplete combustion, gas leaks, and possible backdrafting if you have an older type of ventilation system. So how do these work? Well, these are water heaters, electric water heaters with heat pumps basically strapped to the top of them. So the heat pump that heats your home pulls heat from the air to heat the air inside your home. This pulls warm air from around the unit and heats your water. Cold water goes in the tank. The water gets heated by the heat pump. There's also electric elements in there in case there's like a period of high demand, because they want to make sure you don't run out of cold water. You don't want to run out of hot water, because nobody likes that. So they do have electric heating elements. And what happens? Well, the heat water goes out into various parts of the home, and cool, dry air is discharged because it's pulling heat from the air and it's discharging cold air. Usually, like, people notice, they're like, is this going to take all the heat out of my house and, put it in the water? And people say the room in which the heat pump water heater sits, it's like a 2-degree difference. So a lot of people have them in their basements, but it's not a big difference, and some people don't even notice it. Okay, how much less energy does a heat pump water heater use than a traditional electric unit? A 5%, B 20%, C 33%, or D 66%? It's actually D, 66%. Uses 66% less than that electric unit. And that's because it's, again, moving heat from your air, heating the water rather than heating up a rod and then keeping that, so hot for basically all the time, because that's when we want hot water on demand usually. And because it is so much more energy efficient, this also comes with savings over electric and sometimes in cases of gas. So if you have an electric water heater, you switch to a heat pump water heater, you can expect to save between $300 and $500 a year. And if you have a gas water heater and you're switching to a heat pump water heater, you can expect to like maybe break even or save up to $175 per year. So you'll see these stickers that will estimate how much you'll spend, energy guide stickers. And yeah, I used to have a gas water heater when I lived in a house, and the difference was close to, it's about $130 difference between this $114 one. So that's what you can expect. And there are also incentives for heat pump water heaters. A typical heat pump water heater might cost between $4,000 and $7,000. There's an Excel energy rebates, and also that a rebate from the city of Plymouth can be used for heat pump water heaters, correct? Yep. And if you get a smart one, you get even more money for it. So they have the smart ones with Excel. There's 400 and 500. The 500 is the smart water heater. I'm not entirely sure. I know. I don't know. You have to look into it. It's something with maybe if it's electronic in some way, integrated into some other program. It could be, yeah. You could have it, yeah, connected to an app. But anyway, for whatever it is, it's $100 more. So look into that and see if it's worth it. But well, there you go. Yep. And then again, federal rebates and loans if you need it. Okay, let's move on to cooking. And when we talk about electric energy efficient cooking, we're talking about induction ranges primarily, but not exclusively. And the way these work is that they transfer energy directly to the cooking pan through a magnetic field. Does either of you have an induction stove? You have one? Okay. So yeah, they boil water very quickly, maybe sometimes too quickly if you're not watching. A quart in 2 minutes, which is faster than gas. You can look online. They've done the tests. The good thing about these is they don't overheat the cooktop. They just heat the pan directly because they're operating through that magnetic field. So, if you have the pot sitting next to something that could melt, there's really no hazard with these stoves because it's heating the pan. The stovetops are easy to clean. Generally, they're glass. And the cookware, we'll note, must be magnetic. So, testing your knowledge of magnetic metals. Yeah, must be magnetic. Yeah, yep. And so people often don't know what metals are magnetic because no one's playing around with these things all the time. But which pots work with an induction stove or which types of materials? A, cast iron, B, steel, C, aluminum, D, copper. I know it's cast iron. Yeah, not copper. You're right, cast iron and steel. So if they have iron in them, then that will make them magnetic. But yeah, aluminum, copper don't work with these. I've heard of people getting like a It's like a conductor plate you can put between the stove and if you want to keep your copper cookware, because cookware, to get a whole set, it can be pretty expensive. So that's an option. Um, but if you're just doing the stove with the materials and cast iron steel, or if you have ceramic coated cast iron, that would work as well. So, yep. I will also note that they don't recommend these stoves for people with pacemakers. Something about the um, electric or electromagnetic field or whatever triggers something in the pacemakers. So we like to mention that so people are aware. Traditional electric ranges are also a good option, and they create heat by running a current through a heating element. They're widely available and more affordable than the induction stove, so that's a pro. They are less energy efficient, about 10% less energy efficient than induction ranges, and they are also slower to warm up and cool down. So you have an induction stove, they cool down very quickly. Once you remove that pot, then it cools down quickly, but the electric ranges, they take a while because that element is so hot. One big reason people are switching or starting to consider switching to um, induction or electric stoves is because we're learning more about some of the hazards of gas stoves. So they release pollutants such as nitrogen dioxide and carbon monoxide, or they can, and they may also leak when they're turned off. They may not, but people have found that some of them do. And so one study found that children living in households with gas stoves are 40% more likely to have asthma, suffer from asthma, and electric cooking does not have these issues. Um, and one thing people like about the induction stoves is that they are kind of like gas in that they can be ramped up and turned down like very quickly, and people like the kind of the control they have with the gas stove. So, um, yeah. Induction stove incentives. So you can get an induction stove for between $1,000 and $4,000. There's a federal rebate that's coming 2026 sometime. We don't know when yet. And City of Plymouth doesn't have an incentive, but if you know anyone at Edina or Hopkins, especially Hopkins, they offer up to 2,000 for an induction stove. That's wild. Let them know. But yeah, the other thing you can do is if you just want to try one of these out, they have these single burner. I don't have it with me, but sometimes when we go tabling, we have these like single burner induction stoves, and you can get them for like $70 online. So if you just want to try it out, don't want to pay $2,000 for an induction stove, you don't know if you'll like it, just try one of those. Most people I've talked to who've tried them have not gone back to other types of stove. They really like induction. So, but try before you buy. All right, and clothes drying. So for clothes drying, we're back on our heat pump kick, and we're talking about heat pump or ventless clothes dryers. So these are dryers with heat pump technology, which is very efficient, and it uses that to recirculate warm air to draw away moisture from clothes. So these don't need venting. Most dryers, you need venting to the outside because these aren't pulling air through the clothes with an electric coil or using gas. They don't need venting. You can put them in closets. You just need outlets to hook them into. Is there something? Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and then there's like a tray that catches the condensate, and um, you can just empty, or you can hook up a tube and drain the condensate out. Uh, Either way. So it does, yeah, it pulls that away. Um, this is the most energy efficient option for dryers. These dryers are gentler on clothes because they don't use that like kind of high scorching heat. The downside, or one of the downsides, is that they do have longer cycles. So if your clothes usually take maybe around an hour to dry, with one of these, it might take like an hour and a half. But one thing I've heard is people like putting them sometimes. If there's older people in their homes, they can't get down to the basement quite anymore. Um, People may put the washer and dryer upstairs so that No one has to go downstairs just to do laundry. And again, put these anywhere. Electric resistance dryers are also an option, a good option, and they, like I just said, they heat with electric coils. They dry clothes more quickly than the heat pump dryers. However, you do need venting to the outdoors. They're widely available and affordable, but they also use like 2 times more electricity than the heat pump dryer. So the stove, it's 10% more, but this is twice as much. So significantly more. And then a heat pump dryer between $1,000, $1,700, and there's a federal rebate available. Well, will be available. Okay, let's talk about getting your home ready for electrification. So some homes will need some pre-work before electrifying, and some of the common upgrades that we see are an upgraded service panel and some modern wiring. So if you look at your service panel, usually you might be wondering, well, I don't know how many amps my service panel is. Well, look at your service panel. There's usually a large switch. You can see in this photo, it's in that top black rectangle. And on there, it will have a number. And usually that's between 60 and 200. That'll tell you how many amps the capacity of your panel is. So if you have a 60 amp panel, then chances are you will need to upgrade to add more electricity to the load. If you have 100 amps, it depends on your home and what your goals are, how much electric demand you want to add to your home. And then if it's 150 to 200 amps, then it's unlikely that you'll need an upgrade. You'd have to electrify a lot of things to max out a 200 amp panel. But what I recommend is that you consult an electrician regarding the needs of your home. Talk to a professional. I mentioned wiring, so electrifying appliances may require new wiring. Switching from gas to electric appliances often requires 240-volt wiring and then capping those gas lines. And this would be the case for heat pump water heaters, although there are 120-volt heat pump water heater models out there. So they're relatively new, but they're becoming more popular because the wiring can cost money, and if you can get along without doing that, then why not? Electric stoves, those almost certainly need 240. There are a couple of models, really high-end models that have like battery packs, and those can be 120, but those are very kind of marginal and fringe. And electric clothes dryers, you may need 240, but some of those heat pump clothes dryers also run on 120. So you might want to look into different models and see which ones might work for your home, read reviews, and then also consider that you may or may not have to upgrade your wiring. And the best advice I can give you is, again, to talk to an electrician or an HVAC technician. MK, you mentioned the incentives available for upgrading panels. So upgrading your panel can cost, man, I would say closer to 5,000 than the 2,000. And sometimes it depends even more. But there's a lot of sources of funds available. So with Excel, you can get up to $1,500 to upgrade your panel. Federal rebates, expecting next year, $4,000. State of Minnesota is going to start a grant program for up to $3,000. And City of Plymouth, there are rebates available for upgrading service panels. So for this particular upgrade, there's a lot of money available or will be available to help you start your electrification journey. And the federal rebate for wiring expected this year. Okay, let's talk about resources. So one resource that we like to direct people to is to call or email an Electrify Everything advisor. So this service is free to you since you live in Hennepin County. Electrify Everything advisors are experts who will help you complete your home electrification projects, answer your questions, connect you to financing, rebates, Contractors, they'll help you review quotes, give you, their third-party advice. They don't make any commissions off of like directing people to any contractors or anything, so you can expect them to give it to you straight. And so there's a number there and an email, but I will send out these slides. But yeah, I highly recommend it. The service isn't available free for all residents, but since you live in Hennepin County and they're sponsoring this, you can call them for free. And I mentioned the home energy audits. This is a really good way to start. And in fact, I believe, I can't remember the timeline, but to qualify for some of those federal rebates I mentioned, those higher dollar amounts, you do have to have an energy audit done, I think fairly recently. Also to qualify for the city rebates too. Okay, so, yep. Last 2 years? Okay. Yeah, I know I think for some of the loans, it's last 3 years so anyway, if you haven't had one done recently, then it'd be a good idea to get one done. It's a low-cost utility program, help you find out more information about your home systems, look at your weatherization, your air sealing, levels of insulation, and then they also connect you with recommended contractors, incentives. So you can sign up with the link, and I believe with the city of Plymouth, you get a reduced rate. Usually they're $100. I believe they're $50 with, unless you qualify income-wise, but otherwise they are $50. So you get a discount, and you get all these cool infrared images of your home. So definitely worth it. Yeah, that's the. Mm-hmm. And then this is through the utilities, so they work with Excel and Centerpoint to do this. Actually, sort of, yeah. We work with Hennepin County to kind of like get the word out about this, about these programs and get people, because the county has climate goals and they want people to, taking action. So however they can do that. For contractor networks, there are some good ones out there, and these don't exist in all states. We're kind of actually unique here that we have this air source heat pump collaborative. And these are a list of contractors that work with air source heat pumps. They go through training. They want to work with the technology. You'll find actually if you were to go talk to some contractors about heat pumps, some would say, you don't want that. You want a gas furnace. Like don't even think about that. They'll completely steer you away. They won't even give you options. But not these contractors. They know the technology well and they're experienced. So we have a list. You can go to the website and look at who's part of their network. There's also installation contractors through the Home Energy Squad, and Electrify Everything created the heat pump water heater installer network. So that's people working with heat pump water heaters, pretty new technology, but becoming more and more popular, and the sales have really taken off even in the last few years nationally. So the technology is on the move, and people are taking note and getting qualified to work with it. And here are some energy assistance and weatherization assistance links. So for energy assistance, if you follow this link, you can get help with energy bill payment during the winter months, which we are in, with I'm sure sky high energy bills for people. And they may also qualify for emergency heating system repair or replacement. This is for renters and homeowners, or weatherization assistance. And so people may qualify for insulation, air sealing, heating system, or water heater repair replacement for free, depending on the income. These are the income guidelines. So if you or someone you know might qualify for this, I will send you these slides and you can take action. Okay, so where to get started? Well, like I said, I think a good way to start is to get that Home Energy Squad visit to learn more about your home. After you get that, the advisors, if you follow up with the advisors, they actually will walk you through your report and talk to you about things that you can do to improve your home or areas that are doing really well. So you can do the home energy squad visit and then contact the Electrify Everything advisor, and they'll help you get started. And with that, I'll open it up for questions. If there are any questions that were not answered.